to talk about the news in this class because we've got extra time. So here's a few articles that caught my attention. Google put out a podcast generator recently, which will take an AI engine and you can feed in articles and it will synthesize 2 or 3 people and have them chat back and forth. So it will make an audio podcast out of articles. So, but Meta has made their version, which they say is much inferior and doesn't work very well because the large language model is inferior to Google's. And Google's large language model is nothing to be proud of. It's nothing like ChatGPT, which is by far the best. And Claude from Anthropic is a strong competitor. Claude is very good at doing logical arguments and writing code and stuff. ChatGPT is good for general questions, and all the runners-up haven't really got a specialty that makes them worth much yet. Yeah?
How does Microsoft stack up with Google and Meta?
Microsoft is OpenAI, the leader, ChatGPT. Microsoft had basically made OpenAI a partner. They were the main investor in OpenAI. All the calculations are done on the Azure cloud. And in fact, when they kicked Sam Altman out as CEO about 6 months ago, Microsoft briefly said they would just hire everybody from OpenAI and bring it into the company. And they ultimately ended up with it being a separate company, but they're absolutely joined at the hip. They're as close as you can be.
I see. So
Which is why I think Microsoft is the one poised to make money off AI more than anybody else. They have the best AI, and they're rolling out products that people want to use.
So Microsoft's Copilot is basically just ChatGPT with a new cookmate on it.
It is. It's ChatGPT with some clever additions. It's using it in certain ways that make it more productive for office use. I teach whole classes, and it's kind of fun. Copilot tries real hard to be secure. It also can easily be run on your own servers, so none of the data is made public. And it can incorporate all your custom company data into the answers, which is what most people want. So they just like you'd expect from Microsoft, they figured out what you'd want at a business, and they made that product, and they're selling it. So I think they're way ahead in AI. They made the right investments early. They bet the whole company on it largely. I mean, they have tons of AI products coming out. And so Boeing, on the other hand, appears to be circling around the drain. As you know, Boeing had huge security disasters over the last 2 years. The 737 MAX was their fraudulent airplane, which they lied about. They claimed it was equal to the previous one, so pilots didn't need to retrain when that was not true. And they put in a faulty piece of software to try to compensate. And it had to people dying in a crash. And then their space module is so terrible, there's astronauts stranded on the space station that can't come back because they had to ride back on a Boeing, and the thing just doesn't work. It's so unsafe they don't dare put people in it. And now their staff went on strike. So they seem to be in deep trouble.
The staff went on strike?
Yeah, 30,000 of their employees went on strike. So they're going to have to downgrade their credit, and they just announced they're going to try and raise more money with investment. It's not clear what's going to happen. They're so huge, they're like too big to fail. So many things depend on them, but they're going through a really bad time. This is pretty amazing. This guy, Richard Cash, was a guy that saved a ton of lives, and he did something which affected my mother. My mother had lupus, and that affects your digestion, and she used to have to be rushed to the hospital all the time because when you start throwing up, you get dehydrated. And then they brought out Gatorade. And Gatorade is this magic stuff that you can drink it even if your digestive system is in really bad shape. You can absorb it and it rehydrates you. That means she didn't have to go to the hospital. She could drink Gatorade, and the same thing's true of kids that have cholera and other diseases that make them throw up in like the third world. He found how to mix just the right mixture of like salts and electrolytes and sugars and stuff into water. So it didn't cost much, and you could have it in a poor country, and that would save the lives of kids who are throwing up and getting dehydrated, which is one main way they die. So that was a big thing. And so AI, Claude is Anthropic's AI from Amazon, and it is, like I say, it specializes in logical reasoning, and it's quite impressive at that. But their new thing is they want it to be able to do things on your computer. You can tell it, find this restaurant website, go there and cancel my reservation. Or fill out this proposal for something and look up the facts in these other documents and fill it in for me on the web. So now you can give it control of your machine, and it'll be clicking on pages, running apps and stuff. But the people I just listened to a podcast about it, and they said its rate of failure is like 50%. which is outrageous. And if you're going to trust it to like go into login sites and apps and do things, it needs to be a lot better. And they demonstrated this. They started it doing a coding demonstration, and in the middle of coding, it just quit and started opening up pictures of Yellowstone National Park. So it does seem not to be ready to be trusted controlling your computer yet. And this is probably helpful. As you probably know, people break into, now the most common way to break into a network is to just get the password from somebody, which you can typically do by phishing. You send them a message, say you have to log in for some reason. They log in and they're logging into a fake website giving you the password. But you can also buy them on the dark web from people who phish them and just sell them. But if you don't do either of those things, you can usually get in by just trying all the common passwords, because most people are not very secure and they just choose a common password. And so Cisco now has new features to block these attacks, to notice when people are trying a lot of passwords and block them in various ways, which is a good idea. And of course, I was horrified by this. The Washington Post has been, their slogan is democracy dies in darkness. They've been 100% anti-Trump since the start. They've been where all the anti-Trump opinion writers write their angry screeds about how terrible Trump is. And when it came time to endorse Kamala Harris, the head, Bezos, who owns the Washington Post, was already punished by the government under Trump. They blocked him out of the JEDI contract, which was to take the U.S. military into the crowd, and gave it to Microsoft instead. And he sued, and I think that's still going through the courts, claiming that I think maybe they canceled it. But anyway, that was a huge thing. The Trump administration already punished him and his other companies for daring to speak against him in the press, which is what Trump always says. The press should not be allowed to criticize me. There should be libel laws. I should be able to take away the license from any news TV station that criticizes me and such, like they have in other countries. Like in Thailand, it's absolutely illegal to criticize the king, and Trump wants it to be that way here. And so Bezos had a meeting with Trump about his Blue Origin spacecraft. And so after that meeting, he ordered his paper to not endorse Kamala Harris. So he's in, this is something, there are several researchers on tyranny who've written books about this. When a tyrant appears and starts passing these outrageous rules and just punishing all his friends, punishing his enemies and giving contracts to his friends, you should never concede in advance. If you start doing self-censorship and you start doing things to butter him up without him even asking, then that gives him tons of power. But anyway, Bezos did it. And so a bunch of people quit from the Washington Post over this. I canceled my subscription. Thousands of other people did. You know, the whole point of the Washington Post was to be a strong bulwark against the fascism rising in America. And now, due to the oligarch, Bezos has decided to go along with the fascism. And he said that. He wants the Washington Post to cater more to the right side. So what's happened, of course, is in the last week or so, the polls have made it look like Trump is likely to win. So everybody is freaking out and panicking, saying, oh my God, we've been insulting Trump for years. What's going to happen to us if he actually gets in? And some of them, like the New York Times, stay steady on the course. They endorse Kamala. The New York Times is clearly the enemy of Trump, and they are betting that they can survive his wrath, which will be interesting. The Washington Post has decided to capitulate in advance, which is anyway, it's everyone's very excited about it in political circles. What does this mean for the future? I know when Trump got in before, this is a big issue in Germany. If you read Steppenwolf. Steppenwolf is written by a guy in Germany who watched Hitler take over, and he's trying to figure out what to do, and there's a point when you have to leave the country, before it becomes impossible to leave the country, before they start locking your kind up in death camps. And I figured for me, you have to choose that trigger before it gets too bad, because it's going to be like a frog in boiling water. You're slowly heating up, slowly getting worse. And I remember when Trump first got in, I thought the time to flee America will be when the New York Times turns into Pravda, when it just becomes controlled by the government, publishing lies. And that has not happened yet, but it apparently is happening at the Washington Post. So we're close to that. So anyway, the whole world is holding their breath for our election next week. It'll affect us and many other nations too. It's an exciting time to be alive. Anyway, that's all I wanted to say about the news.